back to my channel. So I first want to say I apologize if you hear the fan or the air conditioning. It is 80 degrees here in North Carolina today, which I was not expecting, and I will melt under these lights without some sort of airflow in this room. So that being said, I apologize if you hear that annoying background noise. But now on to the particular case. This one I've been researching for a very long time, and I considered putting it up in two separate parts because there is a ton of information surrounding the disappearance of this girl, Brittanee Drexel, and a lot has been happening lately in the case, but I decided to just condense it into one very, very long video. So get ready for that. I asked you guys in specific if you'd rather see two videos or one, and a lot of people said there was no way they could wait for a two-part video. So here we go. Brittanee Drexel was last seen on Saturday, April 25th of 2009 in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. As most of you know, I am from North Carolina, and I have actually stayed at a hotel on the block that she more than likely disappeared from, and that has made things incredibly difficult for me to look into. I probably was there just a month before she went missing. I was there for years before that and years afterwards. I was there for my own senior spring break just a year after she disappeared. So I'm very familiar with the area, and it's made things interesting for the research process, to say the least. So Brittanee Drexel was 17 years old when she went missing from Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, but she wasn't originally from Myrtle Beach. She actually grew up in Rochester, New York with her mother and father. Now, I've seen a couple of things that talk about her biological father. He was not in her life for most of her life, I think up until a year before she disappeared. So she saw her father, Chad Drexel, as her father. That's her father figure that she grew up with. That's what he's referred to in most of the articles that I've seen on Brittanee. As I said, she grew up in Rochester, New York with her mother, father, and she had two younger siblings who she absolutely adored. But right before her disappearance, her mother and her father, Chad, decided to split up, and this had quite a huge impact on the children, especially Brittanee. She had been sleeping in late, she had been skipping school, she was rebelling. There were actually 2 times in particular where she had overdosed on her mother's pain medications. Both times was after a pretty bad breakup with her 2-year on and off boyfriend named John. The stress of divorce, the stress of her own relationship, and just the pressure alone of being a junior in high school was starting to wear on her. And her boyfriend John and her friends knew that the one thing that she wanted to do was to just kind of escape it for a little bit, get away and have some fun. And unfortunately, that need to kind of escape her nightmare for a little while ended up being what led her to her disappearance and more than likely murder. Brittanee wanted to go to Myrtle Beach for spring break that year. It was only her junior year, and the seniors every single year went down, about 40 plus of them, to Myrtle Beach to spend part of the week. And she was friends with a couple of the older students, so she was actually invited to go. But because of her past behavior and because of the fact that there would be no parental supervision and she was only 17, both her mother and her father did not agree with her going whatsoever, which caused a lot of tension and a lot of fights, and she did not give up. She asked for a couple of days straight, multiple times a day, but every time the answer was no, and by the end of it, she was so angry that she just stormed out and left after packing up a bag. Now, this is where she came up with this master plan. She decided to ask her mom to stay at a fellow friend's house in Rochester instead of going to Myrtle Beach. Now, to Brittanee's mother, this was a compromise of sorts. She thought, you know, my daughter can still go out and do something fun with friends on spring break without having to go to Myrtle Beach, but Brittanee had other plans. After her mother agreed to this, her and her friends packed up a car and started their 14-hour drive to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. They arrived sometime in the morning on Thursday, April 23rd, and they wasted absolutely no time getting the party started. She kept up this whole charade with her mom through text messages, sending her fake things that she was doing and fake plans she had later to make it seem like she was still in Rochester. She did the same thing while texting her sister, but at the same time she was texting her boyfriend in as well. And at first she seemed to be having a great time. Loved the weather, the warmth. She was so excited to be away from the mess of her family and, and some of the struggles of her own relationship for a while, and she was having a great time. But by the second day, that great time quickly turned into an absolutely miserable trip. Some of the friends that she went with started using a lot of different drugs, and she was not into that sort of scene. So she started to alienate herself from her friends because she wanted nothing to do with it, and it was making her experience absolutely miserable. She went down to the beach by herself. She went and ate some meals by herself out at restaurants. She basically was alone a lot, and for a 17-year-old girl, in the spring break scene at Myrtle Beach, that put her in a lot of dangerous positions that she didn't even realize she was being put into. One example of this was years later, it was found out through a video that this guy took that she approached this absolute stranger, this complete stranger young man, on the Strip, which is the main Ocean Boulevard road of Myrtle Beach. And she had been catcalled by a few guys, so she asked this guy if he would walk her to her hotel. And he did. He was a stranger though, keep that in mind, and she even then afterwards decided to invite him into her hotel. Now this is just to me screaming that she was just a normal 17-year-old naive girl. He was a respectful young man, but this just was a great example of how she was just accepting of these strangers while in this spring break, I'm young, nothing can hurt me mentality. While she was alienating herself from her friends, she ended up running into someone that she knew in Rochester, and his name was Peter. And her boyfriend wasn't extremely familiar with this guy, but Brittanee seemed to be pretty familiar with him. They hung out a little bit while she was down there, and he was staying about a mile away from her hotel in the Blue Water Resort. So Saturday, the day before they were going to leave and head back up to Rochester, New York, she decided to go and hang out with Peter for a little. She was texting John about it the entire time, saying she was still so miserable, she couldn't wait to come home. And before she left to go meet Peter, she grabbed a pair of shorts off of one of the beds in the hotel that belonged to one of the girls she went down there with. Around 8:15, she was spotted on a security camera heading towards Blue Water Resort from her hotel, the Bar Harbor Inn. Her main reasoning for going to Peter's hotel to begin with was that she left some flip-flops in her car and she needed to go get them before they went home. It was also another way to get away from her roommates who were making her time down in Myrtle Beach absolutely miserable. But her stay at the Blue Water Resort was very, very short. As soon as she got there, her friend she borrowed the shorts from texted her complaining that she needed the shorts and demanded Brittanee bring them back. So at 8:48, Brittanee is spotted walking out of the Blue Water Hotel and heading north towards her hotel just a mile away. And at 8:58, she sent her boyfriend a text message saying, "I'm just gonna go home, finish packing up, and then go to bed for the night." That was 10 minutes after she left the Blue Water Resort. John disagreed with this. He thought she should go out and have fun while she was already there, saying, "You went all this way, enjoy it, just enjoy it while you can." But he never received a response back, and 10 minutes passed. He knew something was very wrong, and then by 30 minutes, he knew there was no way she would not text him back unless something happened to her. So just in case she maybe was arguing with her friends or something, he texted her and he said, "Look, Brittanee, if you don't respond to my text messages, I'm going to tell your mom where you really are," and hopes to kind of scare her to coming back to the conversation. But when she didn't respond still, he drew the line. Between 9 and 9:15, all contact with Brittanee had been completely lost. John decided immediately to call her mom and told her everything that had happened. And at first her mom was pretty angry about it. Your daughter goes and does something that you explicitly said no to behind your back. But then it quickly turned into panic when they realized no one knew where Brittanee was. She stopped responding and she is 14 hours away. They all desperately tried to get in contact with Brittanee and not a single person could reach her. Her phone would just ring and ring and ring, but Brittanee would never answer it. They tried contacting Rochester police, but because they were in a completely different state, the police couldn't do much. So John decided to call one of Brittanee's friends in North Carolina, and this friend drove all the way to Myrtle Beach to file a missing persons report. Now, while this was all going on, everyone from Brittanee's family and John himself packed into the car and started their own 14-hour drive to Myrtle Beach to try to find her. At this point, Myrtle Beach police had started their own search for Brittanee. Initially, police believed that she had just run away. It was spring break after all, and young kids tend to do things they wouldn't normally do while they were home. She could have easily left somewhere with a guy. She could have met new friends and gone somewhere with them, since she seemed to be so miserable with the ones she had currently been with. She could have been wandering up and down the beach just hoping to avoid her friends and gone a little too far and was trying to find her way back. Initially, they didn't think there was any sort of foul play involved. They expected her at some point that day just to show up, but she never did. Then they got their very first lead that raised a little bit of suspicion. Peter and all of his friends had left at 2 a.m. just hours after they had seen Brittanee, and hours after the last person had been in contact with Brittanee. And they left in an interesting manner. First of all, at 2 in the morning, they left without getting back their deposit, and they left half of their items still in the hotel room. As soon as arriving back to Rochester, Peter got an attorney, which I know we've said before, it's like a very strange thing to lawyer up pretty quickly, but I've had a few people point out that that's actually one of the safest things you can do. A lot of people see that as guilt, but there's no telling these days what you can be pinned with, especially when you're not under the protection of a lawyer. But he got one. He still fully cooperated though, and they matched up stories. He had the same story as John, same story as friends. It matched phone records and everything. And his reason for the fast departure was that one of the friends he was with had their mom, I guess, find out they were down there and they weren't supposed to be, or there was some situation with a parent telling them they needed to come home immediately. So they packed everything up and just left as fast as they could. Everything checked out, so then they were left with the question again, where is Brittanee and what happened to her? Police thought it should have taken about 15 minutes for her to get from the Blue Water Resort to the first traffic cam that picked her up on her way to go and see Peter. So when they checked that security footage, they expected to see her pass by again had she been going back to her inn. But that camera never picked her up coming back. They decided to go ahead and check her phone records, and that's when they realized something was terribly wrong. At 9:27, just 30 minutes after John had last been in contact with her, her phone pinged 7 miles south of Myrtle Beach. Now, the rate it was going meant she was not walking anymore, and she was definitely in a vehicle, or at least her phone was. Then 2.5 hours later, at 11:58, her phone pinged 50 miles south of Myrtle Beach in Georgetown, near a boat landing, and then shortly after that, her phone either died or was turned off. Police immediately flocked to this location. No one random would have known to go there. It was back roads, country roads, in the middle of nowhere. I've, again, particularly been to a lot of these areas, and unless you live in the area, you are not going to specifically go this way, which suggested to them that whoever took her and the speed at which they reached this place, they basically snatched her and beeline for this particular area, which didn't mean anything good for Brittanee. There were 3 separate counties in this investigation, all searching together this area that her phone last pinged. They knew when they stepped foot in the area that she more than likely would not be found there alive. It was alligator and wild boar infested, along with poisonous snakes, different types of poisonous insects. It was absolutely horrible conditions, and had she been dumped there or even left there alive, she more than likely would have been eaten in 6 hours. They brought in sonar boats, they brought in helicopters, they brought in dogs, they searched tirelessly, and nothing was found of Brittanee. Finally, 8 months later, a tip was called in that led them just a little bit north of where they had searched last, near the Santee River, and they ended up finding a pair of sunglasses in this particular location. Now, no one could really decide if these sunglasses belonged to Brittanee or not. There were some that said there's absolutely no way, some weren't quite sure what to make of them, but the one thing that was for sure is that they didn't show any signs of being there for months like they would have been. There was no mud caked in them, they weren't, falling apart. They looked like they had been placed there, which led a lot of people to believe that whoever called the tip in also purposely put these sunglasses in this place to possibly lead police away from where Brittanee actually might have been. And since no one could positively identify these sunglasses as Brittanee's, they sent them in for forensic testing, which brought back 0 DNA, which was another very strange bit of information, which only supported more really that someone had purposely bought these wiped them clean, and placed them there. By April, police had a few persons of interest and believed at this point that they were dealing with a homicide and no longer a missing persons case, but they just didn't have enough evidence or answers yet. Despite ongoing efforts of family members and multiple different counties' police departments, no more was really found of Brittanee, and they couldn't seem to piece together this puzzle of what could have happened to her. They were left with these pretty large bits of information right at her disappearance and afterwards, but then everything seemed to go cold. But that didn't stop everyone from continuing their search. And then 7 years later, something pretty huge happened in Brittanee's case. A prison inmate sent a letter in to someone in Georgetown, I'm not exactly sure who, saying that they personally witnessed what happened to Brittanee. This man said he went to something known as a stash house in McClellanville, South Carolina. He said he was meeting a man because he owed him money, and this man's name was Deshawn Taylor. Now, the money exchange happened outside of the home, but this man says he had to cross through the home to get to the other side. But apparently when he walked through the home, he witnessed many men sexually assaulting Brittanee Drexel, and one of these men he identified was Deshawn Taylor, Sean Taylor's son. Now, I know that's a little bit confusing. Deshawn is the son and Sean is the father. I'm going to talk about them a lot in the next little bit, so just to kind of clarify for you guys. Once he got back outside, he was out there with Sean Taylor when Brittanee actually escaped. She ran out of the house as fast as she could, where she was then grabbed again by Deshawn, and I think it was 8 other men this man claims to have been there, and she was dragged back into the house. Now, as soon as she was back in the house, Sean Taylor, the father, walked inside, and as soon as he was inside, this man claims he heard 2 shots, and he told investigators that at this point he assumed Sean Taylor had shot Brittanee Drexel. Also, according to this eyewitness, Brittanee had apparently been sold out to other men for a couple of days. She basically was held hostage before she was brutally shot, and then investigators think in order to dispose of her body, these people, whoever did this to her, threw her into the pit, which is an alligator-infested swamp. Deshawn Taylor has since completely denied all of this.
I may as well start with the obvious question. Did you kill Brittanee Drexel?
No, sir. I did not kill Brittanee Drexel.
Were you involved in the kidnapping of Brittanee Drexel?
No, sir, I was not.
Were you with Brittanee Drexel the night she disappeared in April of 2009?
No, sir. I was not with her.
Had you ever met her, or what did you know about her?
I never met her personally or physically. The only thing I've known is from what I've been seeing on TV and the bulletins and what the FBI has been telling me so far.
It says that this man who claims to have seen all of these things he's never met or seen in his entire life. But this actually wasn't the first time that Deshawn had been a part of the investigation in Brittanee Drexel's disappearance and possible murder. Apparently 1 month after Brittanee vanished, Sean Taylor, Deshawn's father, was arrested for trying to abduct a 20-year-old girl outside of the Blue Water Resort around 4 p.m. one afternoon. She was walking down Ocean Boulevard right out front of the resort when a van crept up behind her. At this point, 2 men jumped out and tried to grab her, and the only reason she got away is because she elbowed one of them in the face, knocking them down. She was able to run off, and I'm not exactly sure how Sean Taylor became involved in this case, but for one reason or another he was, and there was a warrant out for his arrest, so he turned himself in to the McClellanville Police Department. When they searched his home after receiving a warrant to do so, they took quite a few things from the property, including a stolen car that's thought to be linked to a homicide that had happened in Charleston County. So another crime had somehow been linked to him. I do want to add on to that real quickly. I have not seen any more information on that car since, or if it did have any ties to the Taylor family in specific. His father does or did work on cars at one point. I know that Deshawn himself has helped his father work on some of these cars, so he could just be a mechanic mechanic that took in this old car someone was trying to get rid of because it was linked to a homicide. There's really many reasons why he could have had this car. Anyway, he ended up being able to provide an alibi, and he was dismissed from this kidnapping case. Now, I do want to say, since 1994 alone, Deshawn Taylor has been convicted of 30 different offenses in this particular county. They are mostly offenses like driving under the influence, failure to pay child support, but he is very well known to the law at this point. His brother, Randall Taylor, even kidnapped and raped Shannon McCoffney in 1998. So a short time after Deshawn's father was picked up and arrested for this other almost kidnapping, that is when Deshawn was brought in and questioned by the FBI. So it was still in 2009 when he was questioned for the first time in regards to Brittanee Drexel's case. The FBI told him that a few people had been questioned in the particular area because of where her phone was last known to be, and a couple of these people had pointed the finger at Deshawn in specific. However, he had been cooperative the entire time. He was 16 years old at the time. He was going to high school. He took a polygraph test and he was told that he passed. Everything was fine. If they had any further questions, they would contact him. Now, that was in 2009. Deshawn wouldn't be contacted again about the case until 2016. A few years after Brittanee disappeared, he had been arrested, charged, and done time for acting as a getaway driver in a robbery of a McDonald's in 2011. He had helped orchestrate the entire crime, which included a shooting, and it wounded the manager of the McDonald's. But he was labeled as the getaway driver, and because he was freshly 18 years old, he ended up only serving, I think it was 2 years of probation, while the other two involved in the crime got many years in jail. However, the FBI decided they were going to arrest him anyways because they thought his penalty for this crime was unfair compared to the other two involved. After they arrested him, they didn't immediately question him about that particular case. They started immediately questioning him about Brittanee. FBI agents themselves have since come forward and said that there were 2 reasons why they decided to arrest him. They apparently were going back through different things in the case because the FBI had just fully decided to take over the case, and that's how they were led to Deshawn Taylor because he had previously been questioned about it. And that's when they just so happened to see his charge from 2011, and they saw the unfair penalty in comparison to the other 2 involved as a perfect way to detain him and not only get him more time for that, but to also question him and hopefully bring the Brittanee Drexel case to a close. Since then, it has been an incredible mess. I've watched multiple interviews with Deshawn Taylor. I have watched multiple different news stations, the family talking about what's going on. I have read a lot of the transcripts from the different times he's been seen in court, and a lot of the people are very confused as to how the FBI is kind of getting away with this. You know, he had done his time. There's double jeopardy here, which if you're not familiar with it, you're not allowed to be tried for the same crime twice. But they've managed to get around that and find a way to try him again. And it has just been chaos, like absolute chaos. At that point, it had been 7 years since Brittanee went missing, and it's not like it was a cold case. The FBI had been involved in and out, you know, helping with things like interrogations and some bits of evidence, and 3 separate counties had continued to work on it. The family had continued to work on it. They had exhausted their options with Deshawn immediately when all of this first happened, and so the judge thought it was kind of strange, along with many other people, that all of a sudden, as soon as the FBI takes over the case, there's all this new interest put into him, and all of a sudden, at the same time, this random witness comes forward. Taylor was given a plea deal in the robbery case, but it all was based on what happened with a polygraph test. He basically was told he would get this plea deal, and if he passed a polygraph test in regard to Brittanee Drexel's case, they would dismiss everything. But if he failed the test, he would be facing life in prison. Now, he denied this plea deal completely, but he still offered to willingly take a polygraph test, which he took, and the person who administered the test said that it was inconclusive. But since then, the prosecution has been throwing out allegations he showed deception throughout the entire test, even when answering his own name, which I find bizarre.
And we begin tonight with breaking news. A person of interest in the Brittanee Drexel disappearance case has failed a polygraph test. I'm Jennifer Mobilia. Federal prosecutors say the test was given to Timothy Deshawn Taylor within the past 30 days, and it was directly related to the Drexel investigation.
And since then, the case has come to a complete halt. There is an unexpected delay that apparently is a matter of law, as they're calling it. They won't give any more information out on that. I don't know exactly what it is or what it possibly could be. I do know that there is a huge army behind Deshawn Taylor claiming that he has nothing to do with this, and they are just trying to pin this case on someone.
The story that was depicted, or the story that was told, when you go back to school records, it tells you right there in black and white that my son was in school, never left school that day. And going back and forth to court, hearing the words of the FBI agent, the reason that he's being charged again for this robbery is because they feel that he knows something about this case. It has nothing to do with the robbery.
And this group in particular has already sent, I think, over 600 signatures to Washington, D.C. in hopes that this is dismissed, because they think the FBI is doing something that they call the squeeze on him, where they basically put him in a lose-lose situation. They're somehow managing to charge him with something even though it should be double jeopardy, and they're pinning this case that he, might have been involved in, that they've dismissed multiple times. It's just this crazy, crazy situation. It's absolutely insane. It's been crazy to follow. So that's where that particular part of this case stands, even though it's not about the case. It's somehow like they've somehow managed to make it about this case. It's, y'all, my brain is fried after researching this. So we're just going to move on to the parts that are relevant directly to this case, which is the eyewitness testimonies when it comes to Deshawn Taylor being there while this was happening to Brittanee Drexel. So apparently in the main eyewitness testimony, 2 of the people that he named were in prison at the time that this happened, so it would be impossible for them to have been involved. And everyone else this man named, they cannot figure out who they are, and the only people they have that could have possibly been there are Deshawn Taylor and Deshawn Taylor. You have to think about the credibility of witnesses. First of all, the man who came forward with this information came forward 7 years after the fact and was recently put in prison to serve 25 years. A lot of the times you will see inmates make up stories that they might have seen on the news, especially if they're from the area, in hopes of lessening their sentence. Now, sometimes they make it up and sometimes they decide to rat someone out because they do know information, and if it can help decrease their sentence, they don't care if they're seen as a snitch. So while this man could be lying, he could also all of a sudden want to tell the truth now that he can use it for something. However, this is where things don't add up to me personally. So he claims he went there to give money to Deshawn Taylor, and when he passed through the house, he saw Brittanee Drexel in there being assaulted by not just Deshawn Taylor, but multiple other people, 2 of which he didn't actually see there because they were in prison at the time. It already takes away a little bit of credibility in his story. It sounds like he might have just been throwing out names of people he knew that were, at one point known as criminals, not knowing exactly when they might have been serving time. He didn't see who killed Brittanee Drexel, and his own guess was that Deshawn Taylor was the one who shot her. So why is all this attention being brought to Deshawn Taylor? I understand 100% that if he was there, he was seen sexually assaulting this girl, which is absolutely sick. But if they're looking for answers in the murder, why haven't they brought in Deshawn Taylor more about it? That's the part that kind of confuses me the most. There are also other witnesses that apparently came forward, one of which was also in prison, or I think it was a detention facility, and this person claimed that someone told them that someone told them that someone told them that they saw Deshawn pick this girl up from Myrtle Beach and take her with him. Now, I will say this. I find it interesting and kind of difficult to believe that 2 people from McClellanville just so happened to be in Myrtle Beach, and Myrtle Beach, you guys, is huge. There is a North Myrtle Beach and a South Myrtle Beach. It takes like 45 minutes to an hour to get from one side to another. The chance that they were both on that same block at that same time, and this person saw Deshawn take Brittanee Drexel, that's like, that would be a hell of a coincidence, is all I'm trying to say. So they're not putting a lot of weight into that, and even the judge has said so far that that holds no weight because it's double hearsay, like there's nothing to that. But it just, again, makes you put into question, are people all of a sudden just trying to benefit off of this year-old case because at this point, all the investigators just want to solve it? Just all very, very interesting. I personally have watched, as I said before, many interviews with Deshawn Taylor, and at first, it really doesn't seem like he's done anything. You know, he seems like a very innocent man when he's talking about it. He doesn't show a lot of anger or, you know, remorse. He just kind of sits there blank. There was one part in an interview that kind of stood out to me. He really seemed to be in control of his words and how he would respond to reporters, and he gave the same sort of answers over and over and over again to all the different people that asked him. He didn't change up his story much, but there was one slip up that caught my attention. There was a reporter at one point that asked him about these different witnesses that were all of a sudden coming forward 7 years later. And his response was he was pretty sure there were no witnesses, and then he quickly sucked those words back in and said, no, I know for a fact there are no witnesses because I don't know Brittanee. I've never seen her physically.
There are witnesses who are not in jail, other than, I assume, this Daquan Brown, who have told them that they saw you with Brittanee. What do you think of that?
If it was witnesses, then it would have been brought to the attention and they would have highly spoke about it, but I'm pretty sure there's no witness. I know that there's no witness because I've never seen her and I've never been with her.
Now, that could easily be a slip up, but when I was hearing it, there was a little bit of anger behind his voice. Almost like, I don't even know how to describe it. And I am not a professional. I am not a profiler. I don't know these things, but I watched enough of his interviews to know when he was getting angry about something. And there was like something that was, you know, he was getting a little bit more into. And when he said this particular part, he was like, I'm pretty sure there are no witnesses.
I'm pretty sure there's no witness. I know that there's no witness because I've never seen her and I've never been with her.
That could just be a slip up, but when we watched the Stacey Peterson video, when Rue Peterson slipped up that one time, we were all like, oh, that seals the deal, like he is guilty. So, you know, you can't really look at one case like that and not another. You kind of have to equally see it from both sides. Now, I know I've personally had times where I've said something kind of weird and slipped up something, and I wouldn't want for everyone to judge me and what actually happened off of my slip up. You know, we're only human and we make mistakes, but I don't at the same time think that's something that should be completely ignored because of kind of his tone behind it, I guess you could say. Now, McClellanville is a very small town. Everyone knows everyone and word travels fast, and everyone thinks it's pretty strange that in this whole entire time, 7 years, everyone would have known this information. If people know it that are now in jail, it most likely traveled the entire town. But the fact that these people aren't coming forward until 7 years later, again, right when the FBI takes over the case, a lot of people think is way too coincidental. There's been this big reward out forever, like this huge reward out. If someone wanted it, they could have easily had it. According to Taylor's attorney, he has a verified alibi for the night she went missing, and he also was in Lincoln High School, attending school at the time that this man said that she was shot and killed. I don't know if the FBI has also confirmed these and legitimized these alibis. Taylor's attorney says that they are 100% proven. So I'm interested to see kind of how this unfolds. Are they just using Taylor as a pawn, maybe against pinning his father, or are they hoping he has other information about some of these other people? I've seen his attorney also say that they have sat down and cooperated as much as they could with the police before he became, I guess you could say, a person of interest. They gave the police all of the government recognized names of these street names that were given to them by this eyewitness. They, you know, helped draw maps of different areas and locate where different houses were. I've seen even somewhere that DNA was found in one of these houses, but I wasn't able to find that anywhere to confirm it. But on her particular Facebook page, they've stated that her DNA was found in one of these stash houses. So maybe this guy who is this eyewitness, maybe he was actually involved in it and he has some issue. Maybe one of his sons or maybe someone he knows or cares about was one of the men that Deshawn threw under the bus and kind of told on once he was caught for the robbery. There's just all these different things that this could really be linked to, and it could just be one person throwing another person under the bus. And it's the craziest thing I think I've watched unfold in such a long time. When it comes to the search for Brittanee and clues about her and where she might have gone, where she might be, well, there are a lot of people who think that Deshawn is innocent. He does have his own army behind him. He has been caught in a few lies, and he does have a few other criminal offenses, so people think it's very possible that he still could be connected, and if he lies about some small things, he could lie about others. For instance, Brittanee's dad decided 3 years after her disappearance to go down to the McClellanville area and pass out flyers in hopes of jogging someone's memory. Now, when he went down there, he started off at a few restaurants, made friends with people in a few neighborhoods to try to see if he could get any information, and then he started passing flyers out to cars that were driving by, and it was like this random dirt road, I think. And he passed out many flyers to many drivers, and then he had a very strange situation happen with one of the cars he tried to hand a flyer to. The car at first didn't want to stop at all, and once he stood in front of it and gave it no choice, he went up to the person that was driving the vehicle and he was like, "This is my daughter, have you seen her?" This whole time there were two people in the back kind of giggling and joking around, and that obviously made him uncomfortable. And then once this man finally took the flyer, he balled it up, threw it out of the car, and then drove fastly away. Now, the man who was driving this vehicle was apparently Deshawn Taylor. When Deshawn was 4 years old, he got into a childhood accident that caused his arm to need to be amputated. So the man that was driving the car had no left arm. Chad Drexel's private investigator was actually there and witnessed this man crumple the paper up and throw it out the window. And when Chad came up to his private investigator and described this man, they immediately realized they had just come in contact with the person who could have possibly been her murderer. Deshawn Taylor still completely denies it. He said he never had this encounter, that it definitely wasn't him, but you can't really mistake someone who's missing a left arm. I'm sure that's not a very common thing. So that's one of the few lies that Deshawn has been caught in regards to Brittanee's case. The FBI decided to search Foxfire Court in March of 2017 in Georgetown County, which is the McClellanville area. And residents could not believe the extent at which the FBI was searching in this area. I mean, they had heavy-duty equipment digging up huge areas of dirt, and residents said that they had to have something in order to be going to these lengths to dig up a part of this wooded area in this neighborhood.
The teenager has been missing since 2009. Today, investigators were speaking out for the first time at the site where FBI and local authorities had been digging for clues.
But I'm confident in telling you that the investigation was advanced. We have progressed, we've made strides in bringing those responsible for Brittanee's death and disappearance to justice.
A 3-day search has come to an end.
That said, there's still more work to do.
And this scene, like much of the Brittanee Drexel case, remains a mystery.
I've uncovered some tremendous leads and we've made progress.
There's little on what lead led investigators here.
We're not going to discuss what we found or what we did not find.
But one thing was made clear.
We're confident we're getting closer to resolving this matter and holding those accountable.
Hope. 8 years after the 17-year-old disappeared.
They also decided to start searching the different alligator pits that the different witnesses brought up that she could have been thrown in. However, there are about, I think, 40 to 50 of them in this one area that she might have been in. So I don't know if it's a reasonable idea to think that they can search them all. I know just searching 40 to 50 lakes alone would be huge, but alligator infested ones I'm sure is a little bit different. Brittanee's mom and Chad are still divorced. I'm pretty sure Brittanee's mom has remarried, but she's also since decided to hire a private investigator on her own because she claims that she has not been contacted by the FBI since 2016, with updates, and she's also decided to open her own tip line to have a little bit more control over the case because she absolutely refuses to give up. The FBI and the family at this point say there is an exhaustive amount of evidence pointing to Brittanee unfortunately being brutally murdered. It's just the question of by who. When I think back to all of this and the fact that there is one person that seems to be really under the spotlight, I personally am not totally convinced that Deshawn Taylor had anything to do with it. As far as what I've seen, you know, obviously I haven't seen actual evidence, but he does seem to have an alibi at both of those times. He apparently was in school at the time she was murdered. Even the eyewitness doesn't think Deshawn was the one who murdered her. Could he have sexually assaulted her? Absolutely. But again, apparently at that time, he was in school. He didn't have his license. He didn't have a car. Does that mean he can't get a car and drive up to Myrtle Beach anyways? No, absolutely not. But it does make it, you know, a little bit less likely. However, Brittanee was also very trusting of others, but I don't think she would have gotten into the vehicle with just anybody. I think while she did accept help from this one random young man while walking on the strip one night, I just really don't see her getting into the car with someone else willingly. She was already halfway into her walk to her hotel. It was only a mile away from the Blue Water Resort, so I'm sure she didn't mind walking. And knowing her and how much she didn't want to be around those friends, I don't think she would have rushed back to getting there. You know what I mean? 1 second she was texting her boyfriend and 1 second she suddenly just wasn't. To me, it is obvious that someone did take her, but the thought of this 16-year-old boy with one arm somehow managing to snatch her while also trying to manage a vehicle, I don't know. I just don't think that seems very likely. So he either had to have help and there's someone who is equally as guilty as he is, or he wasn't the one to have done it. Now, there was a 10-minute period between when she left the Blue Water Resort and when she last sent the text message to her boyfriend. And I've stayed at a hotel on that block. I have literally been there probably just months before she disappeared. I will say that in that particular area, especially on the corner that she more than likely reached before she was taken, there are a lot of dark parking lots. These hotels, unless they're extravagant, normally only have balconies facing the ocean, and the back sides of them usually are just the parking lot. There's not many windows. They probably don't have a lot of cameras, and a car could have easily been waiting there for her. Or maybe it was the same people who tried to kidnap this other girl in front of this resort a month later, and in that case there were 3 people waiting to take this girl. Was Deshawn just a getaway driver in all of this like he was in his later crime? It's just so hard to tell, while so many things do point to Deshawn's family. And if the Taylors aren't involved in this, then there is still a group of men out there that more than once tried to go and take a girl in broad daylight, one of the times, off of the main strip in Myrtle Beach. You guys, this is the main strip, and during spring break, people are walking everywhere. Like, this beach is crawling with people at all times. You're lucky if you get a hotel room in this strip, and it's miles and miles long. Either way, the FBI seems to be getting close to the answers that they need to figure out who murdered Brittanee Drexel, because at this point she isn't just a young woman that disappeared. She is a young woman who more than likely was taken forcefully and then brutally murdered. So I'm interested to see how this case unfolds. Someone knows something, and they've not come forward with a $25,000 reward being up in the air. You know, it makes me scared that it's a bunch of criminals and they've all hid their activity perfectly. It makes me nervous that this family might, you know, be being led around in this dangerous circle of one inmate accusing someone of something when it could just be BS to get themselves out of jail. It's just, I feel like it's gone on for so long, and her family has had to suffer so much, and she is literally probably out there somewhere waiting for her body to be found, unfortunately. I have faith that this will eventually be solved. I'm hoping the FBI isn't just trying to pin this on someone just for the hell of it, to close it. I do think it's very strange that they're going in so hard on Deshawn Taylor. I personally think that there must be some other evidence out there. There must be something else that they haven't released yet that's connecting him. And, you know, it's hard to kind of base your opinion on someone in a case like this, because on the outside it could look like they're completely innocent. But if there's things that the FBI is specifically keeping to themselves, it could paint a completely different picture of Deshawn that we just aren't aware of yet. So let me know what you guys think down below. Was she taken by someone else and the FBI is following just this random lead because they need something? Or do you think Deshawn Taylor had something to do with it? Or do you think it was his dad that did it? Do you think it's weird that they don't seem to be honing on his dad just as much as Deshawn himself? This is just crazy to me, and I think within the next year someone will 100% be charged in this case, and so hopefully I will have some updates for you guys. She deserves justice. This girl made, you know, a young, naive decision that she had no idea would end her life. And I've been there. I've freaking done that. I have been to this beach. I have lived the spring break life on that beach. I have made bad decisions on that beach, and you know, all in the time frame that she did the same. She was the exact same age as me. Like, it's crazy. A year after she disappeared, I was at that exact same beach doing stupid things on my spring break. And to know that that could have been my fate as well, along with all the girls I was with, it just makes your skin crawl. There's something about when these cases hit so close to home that makes you really start rethinking things and some of the decisions you made and how you are going to continue on from here on out. I hope the family finally is able to have a little bit of closure. I hope her story has an ending to it. I think at this point we can all say that it's probably not the best one, but hopefully at least someone's charged and put away for doing whatever they did to Brittanee. But thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to hit that thumbs up button, hit the subscribe button to become a member of the family, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye guys.